The slap cracked through the coffee shop like a gunshot. For one frozen second, every cup, every laptop, every whispered business call inside the gilded roaster fell into silence. A bright red mark bloomed across Jack Reynolds' cheek, just above the old white scar that ran along his jaw. But he did not move. He did not raise a hand. He did not even blink. He simply stood there in his faded flannel shirt, holding his 6-year-old daughter against his chest while the billionaire CEO in front of him stared back, still breathing hard from the fury that had made her strike him. Victoria Stanton expected him to cower. She expected him to apologize. She expected the tired-looking single father with scuffed boots and a child in butterfly patches to understand his place in the world she believed she owned. But Jack only looked at her with a stillness so deep that the room itself seemed to step backward. Sophie's little fingers tightened around his collar. "Daddy," she whispered, trembling. Jack's hand moved gently over her back, slow and steady, the same rhythm he had used years ago to calm soldiers in burning vehicles, wounded men under foreign skies, and now the only person left on earth who could break him. "I've got you, Bug," he said softly. Then he looked at Victoria again. His voice was quiet, almost gentle. "Are you finished?" That was when the first real fear entered Victoria Stanton's eyes, though she did not yet understand why. She did not know the man she had slapped was not a minimum-wage nobody, not a weak father, not a harmless stranger she could humiliate in public. She did not know that for 15 years, Jack Reynolds had lived in places the government never admitted existed. She did not know that generals spoke his name carefully. She did not know that men who had survived war because of him still lowered their voices when they called him Sergeant Major. And she did not know that the most dangerous thing about him was not what he could do with his hands, but what he was choosing not to do with them. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity, grace, and second chances, hit like and subscribe. These stories remind us that quiet strength does not need to shout. Sometimes it simply stands still until the truth makes the whole room silent. Now, back to Jack Reynolds. That morning in Austin had begun with sunlight, blueberry muffins, and one small promise. Jack Reynolds had chosen the corner booth at the Gilded Roaster because it gave him a clear view of the entrance, the emergency exit, the counter, and the hallway that led to the restrooms. Old habits did not retire just because a man did. He sat with his back near the wall, shoulders relaxed enough for ordinary people not to notice, eyes moving just enough for trained people to understand he had never truly left the war. To everyone else, he looked like any rugged single father in his early 40s. Weathered face, faded flannel, worn denim, leather boots that had seen rain, dirt, and too many years. But a soldier would have seen more. The way his hands rested lightly near the edge of the table, the faint scar near his jaw, the measured breathing, the calm that was not laziness, but readiness. Across from him, Sophie Reynolds was destroying a blueberry muffin with the seriousness of a tiny demolition expert. She wore a denim jacket covered in iron-on butterflies, pink sneakers, and mismatched socks because Jack had long ago learned to choose his battles carefully. At 6 years old, Sophie was light, bright, and stubborn in the way children become when life has already taken too much from them. Her mother, Sarah, had died when Sophie was 3 after a 2-year fight with leukemia that emptied Jack's savings, his sleep, and the part of him that still believed surviving combat meant he understood pain. He had been Delta Force then, a Tier 1 operator, the kind of man sent into rooms where failure made headlines no one would ever read. He had led men through gunfire, sandstorms, hostage rescues, and black operations that existed only in redacted files. But no battlefield had prepared him for sitting beside Sarah's hospital bed while she grew smaller beneath white sheets and whispered, "Promise me she'll still laugh." So Jack retired. He handed in his papers, packed away medals Sophie had never seen, moved to Texas, and built a quiet life around school pickups, park afternoons, grocery lists, bedtime stories, and the sacred work of keeping one little girl's world soft. That morning, Sophie had asked for hot chocolate. Jack had said yes because she had gone a full week without a nightmare. She had asked for the big muffin, too, the one with sugar on top. Jack had said yes because sometimes fathers celebrate victories no one else can see. "Daddy," Sophie said, cheeks round with muffin, "can we go to the park after this?" Jack smiled, and when Jack smiled, the hard lines of his face briefly remembered who he had been before war taught him to watch doors. "Only if you finish that muffin without wearing half of it." Sophie looked down at the crumbs covering her jacket. "Too late. Then we negotiate." She giggled, and the sound did something to him that no medal ever had. It made the room worth enduring. The Gilded Roaster was crowded with tech founders, lobbyists, influencers, and venture capitalists speaking softly about money, loud enough to be admired. Espresso machines hissed behind the counter, keyboards clicked, expensive cologne mixed with the warm smell of coffee and pastries. It was the kind of place Jack disliked. Too many exits, too many phones, too many people who assumed price and value were the same thing. But Sophie loved the hot chocolate with little chocolate curls on top, so Jack came. Love often means entering rooms you would rather avoid because someone small feels happy there. Then Victoria Stanton walked in. She did not enter like a customer. She arrived like a hostile takeover. A white Tom Ford suit, black sunglasses, $4,000 heels clicking across polished concrete, two assistants orbiting her with tablets and terror in their faces. Behind her moved Bradley Ford, her bodyguard, a huge man in a tailored black suit whose eyes swept the room with military familiarity. Victoria was 42, founder and CEO of Helios Technologies, a billion-dollar aerospace manufacturing empire with contracts across private aviation, satellite systems, and defense supply chains. Business magazines called her visionary. Former employees called her merciless. Competitors called her expensive trouble. She called herself unstoppable. That morning, she was in Austin to finalize a classified Department of Defense contract worth more than some countries' annual budgets, and the delay had put her in the kind of mood that made everyone around her speak in shorter sentences. "I don't care what legal said," she snapped into her phone as she pushed through the line. "If they cannot finalize clean language by noon, replace them. I am not losing $3 billion because a senior counsel developed a conscience." A young man in a startup hoodie glanced up as she cut past him. "Excuse me, the line starts back there." Victoria lowered her phone just enough to look at him over her sunglasses. "I make more money while blinking than you will make in your entire life. Do not confuse proximity with relevance." The young man flushed and stepped back. A few people stared. Most looked down. Wealth has a way of making cowardice feel like manners, Jack noticed, but said nothing. He had learned long ago that every arrogant person in a room is not necessarily his assignment. His assignment was Sophie, his coffee, his promise of the park. Sophie, meanwhile, had decided to clean up her own muffin wrapper like a big girl. She slid out of the booth with her mug of hot chocolate in both hands, balancing it carefully, humming a cartoon tune under her breath. Jack tracked her movement without thinking. Sophie to trash can. 12 feet. Clear path, mostly. Victoria's path. Intersecting. Speed. Fast. Eyes. On phone. Collision risk. Immediate. Jack's body reacted before his mind finished the math. "Sophie, stop." His voice cut through the cafe, low and commanding. Sophie froze halfway, but Victoria turned the corner around the pastry display at the same instant, still looking at her phone, and slammed directly into her. The ceramic mug shattered. Hot chocolate splashed across the floor and dotted Victoria's pristine white shoes. Sophie fell backward hard, landing on the polished concrete with a gasp that turned every cell in Jack's body cold. The cafe stopped. Even the espresso machine seemed to hiss more quietly. Sophie sat stunned amid broken ceramic and brown splashes, her eyes wide, her lower lip trembling. Victoria looked down, not at the child first, but at her shoes. Her face changed, not into concern, into fury. "You disgusting little brat," she snapped. Sophie's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry. Do you have any idea what these cost?" Victoria's voice rose, sharp and ugly enough to turn heads across the room. "Where is your parent? Who lets a child wander around like an animal?" She reached down as if to grab Sophie by the arm. She never touched her. Jack was there. No one saw him cross the distance. One moment he was in the booth. The next he stood between Victoria and his daughter, a wall of flannel, scar tissue, and silent authority. He did not shove Victoria. He did not shout. He simply placed his body where danger had no permission to pass. "Step back," he said. Victoria recoiled half a step, startled by the suddenness of him. For a fraction of a second, some old animal instinct warned her that she was standing too close to something she did not understand. But pride murdered that instinct quickly. She looked him over. Worn shirt, old boots, inexpensive watch, tired face. Her calculation was immediate and wrong. Poor, powerless, dismissible. Jack crouched without taking his eyes off her and lifted Sophie gently into his arms. Sophie buried her face in his shoulder and cried quietly, embarrassed and shaken. His hand cupped the back of her head. "You're okay, Bug. I've got you." Then he stood and faced Victoria. "You walked into her because you were staring at your phone. You are going to lower your voice. You are going to apologize to my daughter. Then you are going to walk away." Victoria laughed, loud and brittle. "Apologize? To her? Yes. Your feral little creature ruined a $4,000 pair of shoes." Jack's eyes did not change. "Shoes can be cleaned. Children remember." That line landed harder than he expected. A woman near the counter looked down. A barista stopped wiping the machine. The young tech worker who had been insulted earlier raised his phone slightly, recording now. Victoria saw the shift in the room and hated it. People were watching her not with admiration, but judgment. "Listen to me," she hissed. "I am Victoria Stanton. I own people like you. I buy and sell companies before breakfast. I am in this city to sign a defense contract that would pay for your miserable life 10,000 times over. If you think I am going to stand here and be lectured by some low-rent cowboy with a badly dressed child, you are out of your mind." Sophie flinched at the word child, shrinking into Jack's neck. Jack's breathing changed. Slower. Quieter. "Do not speak about my daughter again." Victoria stepped closer. Or what? The room seemed to tighten. Jack did not look angry. That was what made it worse. Angry men warn you. Calm men have already made decisions. "Or you will regret it," he said softly. Victoria's face flushed with humiliation. "I'll call child services. I'll tell them you threatened me. I'll have her taken from you before lunch. You people always have something to hide." That was the first moment Jack considered ending the conversation in a way the room would never forget. Not because she had insulted him. That meant nothing. Men had tried to break him in languages Victoria could not pronounce, but she had threatened Sophie, his daughter, Sarah's last laugh in this world, the promise he had made over a hospital bed. Jack's heart rate slowed. His focus narrowed. Victoria became less a person and more a problem requiring containment. "You're done talking," he said. "Leave." But Victoria Stanton had lived too long without consequences. Power had trained her to believe every boundary was an insult. Rage made her reckless. She drew back her hand and slapped him across the face with everything she had. The sound froze the cafe. A milk pitcher slipped from a barista's hand and clattered against tile. Someone gasped. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Victoria's palm stung. Jack's cheek reddened. Sophie whimpered against his collar, and Jack did nothing. That stillness broke something in the room. Everyone had expected violence, or at least shouting, but Jack simply stood there, absorbing the insult like a mountain absorbs weather. Victoria, still panting, stared at him. For the first time, she noticed that he had barely moved from the impact. She noticed the scar near his jaw. She noticed the cold absence of fear in his eyes. "Are you finished?" he asked. His voice was flat. No drama, no threat. Just a question that sounded like the last chance a person gets before a door closes forever. Then the glass doors burst open. Bradley Ford pushed through the crowd, one hand already moving toward the inside of his jacket, his massive frame forcing customers aside. "Ma'am, step back," he barked. "You," he said to Jack, "put the child down and move away before I put you on the floor." Jack did not move. Bradley took 2 steps closer. Then he saw the scar, then the eyes, then the faint, faded outline of a Grim Reaper tattoo visible near Jack's right forearm where his sleeve had shifted while holding Sophie. Bradley stopped so suddenly his polished shoes squeaked against the floor. All the blood left his face. His hand fell away from his jacket. For 8 years, Bradley Ford had carried a memory from Afghanistan that woke him some nights still sweating. Kunar Province, a valley of rock and dust. A ranger team pinned down for 14 hours, low on ammo, no water, 2 men bleeding out, radio calls breaking under static. Bradley had been younger then. Loud, strong. Certain fear was something weaker men confessed to. By the 13th hour, he had learned better. They were waiting to die when 4 shadows moved down the ridge. No headlights, no announcement, no hesitation. Delta. They entered the fight like judgment. 20 minutes later, the valley was quiet except for wounded men breathing. The man who dragged Bradley's medic through open fire, taking 2 rounds to his plates without slowing, had turned once under moonlight. Scar along the jaw, Grim Reaper tattoo, eyes like winter. Command Sergeant Major Jack Reynolds, the ghost of Kandahar, a man whose name was spoken in special operations circles with a mix of gratitude, awe, and terror. And now Bradley was standing 4 feet from him in a coffee shop, having just threatened to put him on the floor. Bradley slowly raised both hands, palms out. "Sergeant Major," he whispered, voice cracking. "I'm sorry. I didn't know it was you." The cafe went so silent that a spoon settling in a saucer sounded enormous. Victoria stared at her bodyguard. "Bradley, what are you doing?" He did not look at her. His eyes stayed on Jack. "Ma'am," he said, voice low and urgent, "you need to apologize. Right now. Then we need to leave." "Apologize?" Victoria shrieked. "Have you lost your mind? He threatened me." Bradley finally turned to her, and what she saw in his face made her step back. It was not fear of losing his job. It was pity. "No, ma'am. You threatened his child. Then you struck him. In public. You work for me. Not anymore." He removed his earpiece and dropped it onto the floor. "I quit." Victoria's mouth opened. No sound came. Bradley looked at Jack again. "Sergeant Major, I apologize for my approach. I did not recognize you. Jack's eyes rested on him. "You were doing your job." Bradley swallowed. "No, sir. I was doing hers." That sentence crossed the room like a blade. Phones were still up now, recording, capturing not just a confrontation, but a reversal. The billionaire in white, losing command of the very man paid to enforce her will. Victoria looked around and realized people were no longer afraid of her. They were watching, judging, waiting. Her ego panicked before her mind did. "This is absurd," she snapped. "I don't care what costume soldier fantasy you two share. I am Victoria Stanton. I am here to sign a $3 billion defense contract with the Department of Defense. I have senators who return my calls. I have generals who know my name. I am not going to be humiliated by a washed-up veteran and a cowardly ex-bodyguard." Jack shifted Sophie slightly in his arms. "Take your win and leave." "My win?" She laughed wildly. "You think this is over? I'll call General McIntyre right now. He handles special operations acquisitions. He'll have local police drag you out of here, and by dinner your little girl will be in some government office while they investigate whether a violent man should be raising her." Jack's jaw tightened. Bradley said, "Victoria, don't." But she was already dialing. She put the phone on speaker, holding it up like a weapon. It rang twice. A deep, irritated voice answered. "Victoria, this had better be about the final documents." "Robert," she said, instantly shifting into a polished tone so fake that several customers exchanged disgusted looks. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but I've been assaulted in a coffee shop downtown. Some unstable local threatened me after his child destroyed my property. My bodyguard refuses to intervene because he apparently knows the man. I need assistance immediately." There was a pause. "Victoria, call local law enforcement. I'm in a briefing." "He called him Sergeant Major," Victoria said, glaring at Jack. "Apparently the man has a scar and some Grim Reaper tattoo, and my bodyguard is acting like he saw the devil." The line went silent. Not quiet. Silent. Victoria's expression flickered. "Robert?" General McIntyre's voice returned, but it had changed completely. The irritation was gone. In its place was caution. "Describe him again." "I just did. Flannel shirt, scar on his jaw, tattoo, holding some crying child." Another silence. Then McIntyre said very slowly, "Put him on the phone." Victoria blinked. "Excuse me?" "Put him on the phone, Victoria. Now." The command in his voice was so sharp that even she obeyed. She held the phone toward Jack. Jack did not take it. He leaned slightly toward the speaker. "McIntyre," he said. "It's Reynolds." On the other end of the line, inside the Pentagon, General Robert McIntyre closed his eyes and lowered his head into one hand. He knew the voice. Every senior officer connected to special operations knew the voice. Jack Reynolds had pulled pilots from impossible valleys, recovered hostages from places no aircraft could officially enter, and saved men whose stars now sat on their shoulders. McIntyre owed him more than respect. He owed him lives. "Jack," the general said, and everyone in the cafe heard the reverence in that single word. "It's been a long time. How's Sophie?" Victoria's face went pale. The phone trembled in her hand. Jack rubbed Sophie's back. "She was having a good morning. Then your contractor walked into her, knocked her to the floor, screamed in her face, threatened to have her taken away, and slapped me when I asked her to apologize." The silence that followed felt endless. McIntyre's voice returned cold. "She slapped you?" "She did." Victoria rushed in, panicking now. "Robert, wait! He intimidated me. He was aggressive. His child ruined—" "Stop talking," McIntyre snapped. The force of it made Victoria flinch. "You are standing in front of a man who gave more to this country than your entire boardroom could understand if I briefed you for a week." The fact that you struck him and are still standing is not evidence of your power. It is evidence of his restraint. Victoria's lips parted. Robert, the contract. There is no contract. The words fell cleanly. Effective immediately, Helios Technologies is suspended from all Department of Defense acquisition discussions pending review. Victoria staggered as if he had struck her back. You can't do that. I can, and I just did. My board will sue. Your board will be too busy answering questions from federal auditors. If your judgment allows you to physically assault a decorated veteran while threatening his child in a public cafe, I have concerns about your judgment handling classified aerospace systems. Robert, do not call me again unless your legal counsel is present. His voice softened only when he addressed Jack. Jack, I'm sorry. Truly. Give Sophie my best. Jack nodded once, though the general could not see it. Take care, Robert. The call ended. Victoria stood in the middle of the cafe, phone still raised, her face stripped of color. In less than 2 minutes, the foundation of her empire had cracked in front of baristas, venture capitalists, students, influencers, and one little girl with tear-streaked cheeks. The room was silent again, but this silence was different. It was not shock now. It was consequence. A slow, moral stillness. The kind that fills a room when arrogance finally meets the wall it always believed was a door. Then came the police lights. Red and blue flashed across the front windows. 2 Austin police officers entered, hands near their belts, eyes moving over the crowd. The older one, Officer Miller, took in the shattered mug, the spilled hot chocolate, the tense customers, the billionaire trembling with rage, and the father holding a child with a visible handprint on his face. We got a call about a disturbance, Miller said. Victoria lunged toward them as if salvation had arrived in uniform. Officers, thank God. Arrest that man. He threatened me. He assaulted me. His child attacked me, and my own bodyguard has lost his mind. Miller looked at Jack, then Sophie, then the mark on Jack's face. Before Jack could answer, the young tech worker Victoria had insulted earlier stood up. His voice shook, but he did not sit back down. Officer, she's lying. Victoria spun on him. You little... I recorded the whole thing, he continued, holding up his phone. She cut the line, insulted people, ran into the little girl, screamed at her, threatened the father, and slapped him. I have it all. A woman near the counter stood too. So do I. Me too, said someone from the back. 3 angles, another man added. The kid did nothing. For the first time that morning, Victoria Stanton had no room to rewrite reality. Officer Miller sighed with the weary expression of a man who had seen too many powerful people expect laws to bend around their shoes. Ma'am, turn around and place your hands behind your back. Victoria recoiled. Absolutely not. Do you know who I am? I know you are being placed under arrest for assault. I will have your badge. You can discuss that downtown. The handcuffs clicked around her wrists. That sound changed the room more than McIntyre's call had. The call had wounded her empire. The cuffs touched her body. Victoria began shouting then, all control gone. She threatened lawsuits, careers, city officials, governors, judges. No one moved to help her. Bradley stood aside, face grim. The baristas watched. The customers recorded. Jack turned Sophie slightly away so she would not see the worst of it. When the officers led Victoria toward the door, she looked back once at Jack with hatred and fear tangled together. He did not return either. He did not gloat. He did not smile. Revenge was not what had brought him across the cafe. Love had. That was all. As the doors closed behind her, the noise of the cafe did not come back immediately. People seemed unsure what sound belonged after something like that. A barista approached with shaking hands. Sir, I'm so sorry. We can replace the hot chocolate and the mug. And whatever she said, Jack shook his head gently. It's all right. No, the barista said, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. It wasn't. Jack looked at her, then nodded once. No, it wasn't. Sophie lifted her head from his shoulder. Her eyes were red. Daddy, I dropped the cup. That almost broke him. Not the slap, not the threats, not the memories stirred by Bradley's recognition. That small apology from a child who thought broken ceramic mattered more than her own fear. Jack kissed her forehead. Cups can be replaced, Bug. She was mad. Yes. Because of me? No. Jack's voice softened into something the entire cafe could feel. Because some people carry storms inside them and blame whoever gets wet. Sophie thought about that. Do we still get the park? A small, astonished laugh moved through the crowd. Jack smiled, real and warm. We still get the park. And ice cream? Now you're negotiating like a professional. With sprinkles? All the sprinkles. Bradley stepped closer, slowly, respectfully. Sergeant Major. Jack looked at him. Bradley. The big man seemed smaller now, not in weakness, but humility. Kunar, he said quietly. You got Martinez out. Our medic. He has 3 kids now. Jack's eyes softened almost imperceptibly. Good. He talks about you every year on the day. Jack looked away. The past was a country he did not visit with tourists. Take care of yourself, he said. Bradley nodded, understanding the dismissal. Then, after a moment, he looked at Sophie. Your dad is a good man. Sophie sniffled and rested her cheek against Jack's shoulder. I know. That answer made the whole cafe quiet again, but gently this time. Jack carried her past the tables. As he reached the door, the young tech worker stepped forward awkwardly. Sir, I'm sorry I didn't say something earlier. Jack paused. You said something when it mattered. The young man nodded, ashamed and relieved at once. Outside, Austin sunlight spilled across the sidewalk, warm and golden after the cold violence of the cafe. Jack stepped into it with Sophie in his arms, leaving behind the broken mug, the spilled chocolate, the phones, the whispers, the empire beginning to shake. He did not look back. But consequences do not end when a man walks away from them. By noon, the video had spread across social media. At first, the headline writers used the simple language of outrage. Billionaire CEO slaps single father in Austin Café. Then veterans began identifying Jack. Not with classified details, not with stories that could not be told, but with enough reverence to change the tone of the conversation. Retired Ranger recognizes Delta legend. Former operator remains calm, while CEO threatens child. Defense contractor loses Pentagon deal after public assault. By late afternoon, Helios Technologies stock had fallen hard enough to trigger emergency calls. Board members who had tolerated Victoria's cruelty when it produced revenue suddenly discovered moral concern when it threatened market value. Federal auditors announced a review. The Department of Defense confirmed all pending Helios acquisition discussions were paused. Victoria's attorneys issued a statement about a stressful misunderstanding. The internet replayed the slap 10 million times and did not misunderstand anything. Jack learned most of this from Bradley, who called once, not to gossip, but to warn him that reporters had begun gathering outside the cafe and searching public records. Jack's first instinct was to disappear. Old training. Protect the perimeter. Control exposure. Keep Sophie away from cameras. But that evening, while Sophie drew butterflies at the kitchen table in their small rental house, Jack stood at the sink washing dishes and realized something that felt almost heavier than combat. Sophie had watched a powerful adult hurt someone and lie about it. She had also watched strangers stand up, a bodyguard tell the truth, a general defend honor, and her father refuse violence when violence would have been easy. That lesson mattered, not the headlines, not the contracts. The lesson. "Daddy!" Sophie called from the table. "Was that lady bad?" Jack dried his hands slowly. He turned and leaned against the counter. Sarah would have known what to say. Sarah had been better with the soft truths. Jack had spent too many years in hard ones. "She did a bad thing," he said. Sophie frowned. "But is she bad?" Jack sat across from her. "I don't know, Bug. Sometimes people build a life where nobody tells them no. Then the first time someone does, the ugly comes out." Sophie colored a butterfly wing purple. "Do you think she's sorry?" Jack thought of Victoria's face as the cuffs went on. He had seen fear, rage, humiliation, not sorrow, not yet. "I hope she becomes sorry," he said. "That's different." Sophie nodded, accepting this with the quiet seriousness children give to things adults make complicated. "You didn't hit her back?" "No." "Were you scared?" Jack smiled faintly. "Not of her." "Then why not?" He looked at his hands, hands trained to break, hands now used for lunchboxes, ponytails, dishes, and holding a child steady after a cruel world knocked her down. "Because being strong doesn't mean doing everything you can do," he said. "Sometimes it means choosing what not to do." Sophie considered that. "Like not eating all the sprinkles at once?" Jack laughed. "Exactly like that." She smiled, and for Jack, the day became survivable. 3 days later, Jack received a letter. Not an email. Not a statement through lawyers. A handwritten letter on thick cream paper, delivered by courier and left on his porch. He almost threw it away when he saw the name. Victoria Stanton. But Sophie was at school, the house was quiet, and something in him believed that avoiding the letter gave it more power than opening it. So he sat at the kitchen table and read. The letter was not elegant, not polished, not written by a communications team. There were crossed-out sentences, places where the pen had pressed too hard. Victoria wrote that she had spent 2 nights watching the video without sound because she could not bear to hear herself. She wrote that she had built Helios after her father told her no woman could hold a defense firm together, and somewhere along the way, she had mistaken cruelty for strength because cruelty got results faster. She wrote that none of it excused what she had done. She did not ask him to defend her. She did not ask him to stop the charges. She did not ask to meet Sophie. She wrote only one sentence near the end that made Jack stop. "I saw your daughter apologize for a cup I broke inside her, and I understood that I had become someone children fear." Jack folded the letter and sat with it for a long time. A week later, at the first court hearing, the room was packed. Reporters filled the back. Veterans stood quietly along one wall, not invited, not organized, just present. Bradley sat 2 rows behind Jack. Victoria entered without the white suit, without sunglasses, without assistance. She wore a simple dark dress and looked smaller than she had in the café. The judge reviewed the assault charge, the public disturbance, the video evidence. Victoria's attorney stood, polished and ready to soften every edge. Victoria touched his sleeve and shook her head. Then she stood. The courtroom quieted. "Your Honor," she said, voice unsteady but clear. "I do not contest the facts. I struck Mr. Reynolds. I threatened him. I frightened his child. I lied to officers. There is no context that makes that acceptable." Her attorney closed his eyes. Cameras clicked. The judge leaned forward. "You understand the consequences of that statement?" "Yes." Victoria turned slightly toward Jack. Her eyes did not ask for rescue. That mattered. "Mr. Reynolds, I am sorry. Not because I lost a contract, not because I was arrested, because your daughter was hurt and I made her believe even for a moment that she had done something wrong by existing in my way." Jack said nothing. The courtroom was silent. Victoria swallowed. "I cannot undo that. I can only name it." The judge ordered community service, anger management counseling, a public apology, and restitution to the café. The assault charge remained on record. Outside, reporters shouted questions. Jack ignored them. Victoria did too. But as Jack reached the courthouse steps, she spoke behind him. "Sergeant Major." He stopped, but did not turn at first. "I don't deserve forgiveness," she said. Jack turned then. "No one does." Her eyes filled, but she held herself together. "Will she be all right?" Jack looked toward the street where Sophie waited with Bradley's wife, eating a granola bar and swinging her legs. "She has questions." Victoria nodded, pain crossing her face. "Children should not have to." "No," Jack said. "They shouldn't." Victoria took a breath. "I resigned this morning." Jack studied her. "From Helios?" "From the CEO position. The board would have removed me anyway, but I wanted to sign it myself." For a moment, the woman who had claimed to own people stood on the courthouse steps with nothing to command. "What will you do?" Jack asked. She looked down. "Learn how not to be obeyed." It was the first honest thing she had said to him that did not sound prepared. Jack nodded once. Not forgiveness, not friendship. Acknowledgement. Sometimes that is the first mercy truth allows. Months later, people still told the story as if it were about instant karma. They liked the slap, the bodyguard freezing, the general's phone call, the billionaire in handcuffs. Those parts were easy to repeat. They had shape. They had drama. They gave strangers the satisfying rhythm of pride meeting consequence. But Jack never told it that way. When Sophie asked about that morning, he talked about the park afterward, the ice cream with too many sprinkles, and how the young man in the cafe had stood up when telling the truth was still scary. Bradley visited once with Martinez, the medic Jack had saved years before, now walking with a cane and carrying photographs of his 3 children. Sophie made them all sit on the floor and judge a butterfly drawing contest. Jack watched 2 veterans laugh with his daughter under paper wings taped to the wall, and he thought again of Sarah's last request. "Promise me she'll still laugh." She did. Not every day, not without shadows, but she laughed. As for Victoria, she vanished from headlines after donating a large portion of her severance to veteran family services and child trauma programs. Some said it was image repair. Maybe some of it was. People rarely become pure overnight. Grace is not a magic trick. But once, 6 months after the cafe, Jack received a small package with no return address. Inside was a ceramic mug painted with blue butterflies, clearly chosen by someone who had spent too long deciding whether sending it was appropriate. There was no long letter, just a card with 7 words. Cups can be replaced. Childhood cannot. Jack showed it to Sophie. She ran one finger over the painted butterfly and said, "She learned?" Jack looked at the little mug, then out the kitchen window where afternoon light touched the fence. "Maybe she started." Sophie nodded. "Starting is good." Jack smiled. "Yeah, Bug, starting is good." That evening, they took the mug to the park filled with hot chocolate from home because Sophie said cafe hot chocolate was now too dramatic. They sat on a bench beneath oak trees while the Texas sky turned gold. Sophie leaned against his side, safe and warm, her feet swinging above the grass. Jack's cheek had healed. The video had faded. The world had moved on to newer outrage. But inside him, something quiet had settled. He had spent much of his life believing strength was measured by missions completed, enemies stopped, men brought home alive. Later, he believed strength was surviving grief without letting it swallow his daughter's childhood. But that morning in the cafe taught him another kind of strength. The strength to stand between cruelty and innocence without becoming cruel. The strength to absorb humiliation without passing it down. The strength to let the room see the truth and trust that truth, when given enough silence, can defend itself. Sophie looked up at him. He looked up at chocolate on her upper lip. Daddy? Yeah? If someone is mean again, will you still not hit them? Jack wiped her lip with a napkin. I'll always protect you. But will you be quiet? He looked across the park where children ran through the last light of day and parents called them back from the edge of the path. If quiet is enough, he said. And if it's not? Jack kissed the top of her head. Then I'll still be your dad first. She accepted that completely and returned to her hot chocolate. Jack put an arm around her and watched the sun lower behind the trees. Dignity, he had learned, is not weakness dressed politely. It is power under control. It is the hand that does not strike back because a child is watching. It is the father who refuses to let another person's ugliness decide what kind of man he becomes. And grace is what remains after the noise fades, after the cameras leave. After the world stops cheering for punishment and starts listening for what can still be healed. That morning, a billionaire thought she had slapped a nobody. Instead, she struck a mirror. And in the silence that followed, everyone in that cafe saw exactly who they were. In life, true strength is not measured by how much power you hold or how loudly you can assert yourself, but by how gracefully you handle the unexpected storms around you. Jack Reynolds, a father and former Delta Force operative, teaches us that courage is often quiet, shown in restraint rather than retaliation. When faced with cruelty, he could have unleashed the full force of his past, yet he chose patience, calm, and protection for what mattered most, his daughter's innocence. This story reminds us that dignity is not weakness, and grace is not about forgetting injustice, but about choosing what matters over what hurts. We learn that standing firm in our values, even in the face of humiliation, sends a louder message than aggression never could. Every day we encounter small cafes of life, moments when patience, love, and quiet courage are tested. How we respond shapes not only our own character, but also the example we set for those who look up to us. Take a moment today to reflect. When life tests you, will you choose reaction or restraint? Share your thoughts in the comments below about a moment when quiet strength made all the difference. And if this story inspired you, hit subscribe to explore more powerful lessons that teach us how to live with integrity, compassion, and courage.